pretty bold statement, but when you think about it, outside of like really crazy things, it is. And it is because when we look at agriculture's footprint, it's the reason why we're losing pandas and tigers and elephants, right? The habitat that's being lost is a direct result of agricultural activity. And I brought some numbers too, that it wasn't down to the level that Belinda was talking about when you're associating a dollar figure around biodiversity. And if I can get the slide to move. The number is 70%. Hopefully it'll come up. 70% of the biodiversity loss we see on the planet, back one slide please, is a direct result of agriculture, right? When we think of this terrestrial, it's really not even terrestrial. It's the biodiversity loss on the planet. 70% of it is a result of agriculture. It's not water, it's the biodiversity loss. The other slide. I'm not moving anything yet. There we go. So automatically, my brain at least goes to the Amazon rainforest, right? That's like this iconic area where we're losing so much biodiversity. We're losing this footprint. But guess what? There's an area called the Northern Great Plains. Anybody familiar with it? It's this vast land region that stretches in North America through the U.S. and up into Canada. And each year, WWF does what's called the Plowprint Report. So in 2015, we found that the Northern Great Plains is losing more grassland than the Amazon Brazilian rainforest. We are continually converting more native grassland, temperate grassland, some of the last remaining grassland on the planet, to agriculture at a pace greater than the Amazon Brazilian rainforest, at a time when we already grow enough food to feed everybody. Like, this is an insane equation. It makes no sense at all. And so we're thinking in terms of, that's why we have a food team at WWF. That's why I work as part of food efforts, is because we have to start thinking about freezing the footprint of our food production, right? We don't need to be expanding more. We need to be doing more with what we have and making the system more efficient. That is, in essence, my job. Now, when we look at it, it's not just land-based, too. It's also seafood, and I think Kai is going to hear my seafood rant again, and some of the other folks may as well. You've probably heard it. But in the U.S., we lose 40 to 47% of all of our available seafood. This was a report done by Johns Hopkins. And this, a lot of it, they're looking at, they're estimating that a lot of it is on the consumer side, so when we get things into retail and we get things into homes. Well, I would lobby that if we truly valued our seafood and our ocean's resources, right now about 30% of them are completely overfished, and it's only about 10% of our total ocean resources that can even allow even more fishing. Like, we can't take any more from our oceans, basically. But I would lobby that if we truly valued those resources, we wouldn't sell it spoiling over a bed of ice in the grocery store. We wouldn't be content, we wouldn't be satisfied with even seeing a 5% shrink or a loss in grocery stores, sometimes getting up to 20%. We would fundamentally sell this food differently, and we would value it with a zero tolerance of loss. And I think that's what we need to be looking for. We need to change institutionally how we do this. So in terms of my focus and role, we have this big consumer-facing business challenge, right? This is from the ReFed report. Some of you may have been familiar with this report and the data. It's got some great visuals. But so much of the loss and waste of what happens in the U.S. happens at that consumer-facing business side. Now, I have a great luxury. World Wildlife Fund, we have partnerships with like 100 of the top food companies in the world. And we've already been working with a lot of these big companies on issues like sustainable sourcing and sustainability overall. Well, I get the luxury of having direct access to them already. So it's really been amazing for me. So what we're trying to do is focus, most of my time is on prevention. It's on prevention efforts. How do we institutionalize food waste reduction across every institution? Because I want to, from Back to the Future, has everybody seen that movie? Just real quick. Remember the Mr. Fusion, where they drop in all the beer and the banana peel at the end of it? There is no way you ever recover all the energy from the waste that we generate. There's no way you do it with current technology. So the only thing that we should focus on is prevention. Not the only thing. Shouldn't say that. I'm all for composting and disposing of things right, but prevention is my focus. So I want to spend some time and talk about the 3 areas that are the biggest areas right now where I'm spending the majority of my time. When we talk about institutionalizing food waste reduction and prevention, we've made some great progress with the hotel industry. So in 2015 when I started, we just signed an agreement with a partnership with Hilton Hotels. Pretty good hotel to start your job with, right? That's a pretty big brand. They have a lot of hotels. But what this eventually led to was an understanding that when we started the Hilton partnership, we didn't want to just do it with Hilton. This wasn't just about changing how Hilton approached food waste. We knew that in order to institutionalize this, you had to get Hilton, Hyatt, Marriott, IHG, all the major brands involved. So what we've actually launched in connection with the American Hotel and Lodging Association, we launch it next week. We're going to be launching pilot projects with those 6 major brands and even some independents where we're going to be testing food waste prevention at 10 hotels. And I can tell you, we can talk spreadsheets and numbers, and we do all, we've done days of it here. Go talk to a general manager at a hotel about this issue. You get a completely different feeling and response. Like, this is not about saving the planet for them. This is about what I can do for them. It's about money. And you can be cynical about that, or you can just say that's the way it is. That's the way you have to approach businesses and institutions. You have to talk their language. And it has been a growing experience for me, one, to learn about the hotel industry, but also to focus on not just that GM, but how do you influence the chef? How do you influence the food and beverage director? How do you influence the dishwashing and the stewarding crew that are ultimately handling all this material, right? This is a fundamentally, it's important for us to understand that you have to be able to take these concepts and relate it down to that lowest common denominator in order for anything to work. So I look forward to coming back at some point maybe and sharing the results of these projects. They're going to go until about June. And then our goal is to have an industry, I hate to say toolkit, but just an industry awareness campaign with the hotel and lodging industry. And what I'm hoping for is that we find this lowest common denominator of measurement. What can all these brands measure consistently in terms of food waste? And then how does that trickle into all the other institutional sectors, retail, grocery, food service? How do we get all those industries working together and collaborating pre-competitively? The other area we're working in, we have a project that just launched this year at Farm. We have 2 research groups, and actually Lisa Johnson, wave your hand. Lisa Johnson is part of our research team from NC State. But what we are doing is we're going to be working with farmers. We're going out with farms, and we're trying to do as much direct measurement of food underutilization and surplus as possible. We're not even calling it food waste in this project because farmers do not waste food. And the minute you start talking about farmers wasting food, people get defensive and they turn off. And so we're changing even the way that we talk about this project with farmers. The interesting thing about this project I want to point out is that we have several different measurement methodologies. We have research teams from UC Davis, from NC State, and from the Global Cold Chain Alliance, and everybody's going out and measuring things differently. But what we're going to try to do is harmonize all the measurements using the food loss and waste standard and hopefully be a really great example to show how this standard is used and how everybody can measure different ways, but how that standard harmonizes results at the end. Right now we're looking at just a couple. I mean, we can't tackle the whole specialty crop chain, but we're looking at peaches in Georgia, potatoes in Idaho, my home state, with Mr. Sid, go Idaho, tomatoes, leafy greens, and then also UC Davis, they're doing a lot of qualitative interviewing with farmers in California, and hopefully we can get Lisa Johnson and her standard looking at some of those places in California as well and doing on-farm measurement. Final thing, and this is kind of near and dear to my heart because I spent a lot of time before WWF working with schools. We're we're doing a school curriculum project. So we just launched it a couple weeks ago. We're working with a group called the Environmental Research and Education Foundation, and they're trying to get more schools doing food waste audits, getting kids mucking around in bins and figuring out how much food waste they generate. And as part of that, what I did is we developed a curriculum, a lesson plan for teachers that links this connection between wildlife, habitat loss, and food waste. It makes it fun for schools. We created these little food waste warrior bracelets. I actually have some in my bag if somebody wants one. But we're just trying to get this embedded in this next generation of thinkers, because I personally think if we don't, each year we're just graduating a new class of folks that don't understand what we need to understand, which is that food is important, and that if we don't start to understand food and its connection to our planet, we do it at our own peril. So that's it.
Great, so let's move to some questions. So we'll take questions for about 15 minutes.
This question is for Brenda. My name is Gary from the state of Michigan. But in the new Senate Bill 1383, just to kind of bring it down to a store level, if you're a grocery retailer and you have certain dairy, meats, delis, produce that is being landfilled currently in the state of Michigan, or excuse me, in the state of California, this new bill, how will that be measured or tracked, or what impact is that going to have directly on that grocery retailer as it regards to their current food, perishable food landfill policy?
Well, you're not going to be able to do that. So right now we have AB 1856, which I didn't talk about, which is an organics commercial recycling bill, but it has no enforcement in it, no real enforcement. It says you're not supposed to be putting your commercial organics in a landfill. You're supposed to be recycling them. But CalRecycle doesn't really have much more than a bad boy list hammer, to be truthful about that, on 1856. But 1383 came along this fall and said, well, we're going to fix that. And so CalRecycle has authority and some penalty consequences. And I'm not positive, but I think they're like $10,000 a day fines, and that can add up really quickly. And we don't typically come out using that hammer broadly and widely, but we use it very effectively. AB 939 was passed in 1989, and we had similar penalties under our authority. This was aimed at the cities and counties to implement recycling and diversion activities. And over the years, we also provide assistance to those cities and counties to show them how to do that before we come out in our enforcement and our penalty phase. And generally speaking, the cities and counties come on board. They implement what they know they have to. We run into a friction a little bit, and the attorneys start talking, and they say, yeah, that's the law. And so then they start behaving. So I think it's going to be very effective. Our challenge is going to be to place the mandates in the right locations, to get data and reporting so we know what we're doing and how we're getting there, and then to use our enforcement and compliance effectively, and then to bootstrap the infrastructure for moving these organic materials out of landfill to new alternatives, including edible food, to get that infrastructure in place to be able to receive it. And of course we have very aggressive timelines in the bill. So it's going to be a huge challenge, I think, for us. But
what I was a little bit confused on, the bill won't go into effect or law until 2022.
2022, I know.
But you've got some of these mandates
yes.
that,
yes.
I guess,
that's a sausage making.
Let's take it down to a practical application. I'm a store manager working for a grocery retailer. When do I need to, you know, I'm not a store manager at a grocery retailer, but I'm just trying to solve a business problem here.
Right.
But what point in time are they going to go, uh-oh?
Well, usually a bill is passed and then you have phase-in in the future. This one is retro, as you've pointed out. We are also moving fast on our regulatory development and trying to have that adopted and in place late 2018, early 2019. That is not effective until 2022 either. But what it allows the cities and counties to know is that on 2022, if you are not achieving the 50% that you were supposed to achieve in 2020, then we have a full authority to come in and say, why not? And here's the consequence. So I think it's a vision. I think it tells people we're serious, get on board, do what you can, because in 2022 we're going to be coming out and looking. And so we're trying to get our reg in place to know, for people to know who's mandated to do what early, long before it's effective, so they can start doing that.
Okay, we have a few more questions. So Christine at the back, and then over to Roberto, who's got a very brief question I heard, and then over to Aaron, and then I see one at the back as well. So over to you, Christine.
Sure. This is a question for Brenda as well. I was just curious as to, you mentioned that the cap and trade revenue, there was some element of funding that went into the food donation system. It wasn't clear to me whether or not that's already in place or whether or not that's something that's coming. Yeah. And if it is in place, or if you know in the future how much revenue that will generate for the food recovery industry.
It is in place. The thing about the cap and trade dollars is they're hundreds of billions of dollars, so it's a big money source. But the other thing about it is that we don't have guaranteed funding from one year to the next because it's part of the California state budget, and we have a lot of argument in California about what that should be used for. So
general revenue.
Right, or building anyway. So so it's not what I would consider sustainable funding. It's big dollars, and when we get it, we're very excited. We had Cycle 1, and those were the case studies that I showed. There's a couple of ways that we're using that money. We are partnering, we are encouraging our haulers, but also our processing facilities for waste to partner on the front end. And so they're getting the lion's share of the money to build an infrastructure that we need to build to handle waste. But we're encouraging them, if they want disadvantaged community points, which are very high in these grants and they're competitive, they need to reach out and go meet the food rescue, food recovery organizations, and they're doing that. And so that's the first cycle that I showed. That was 14-15 money. We didn't get any in 15-16. So now we're working on 16-17. So that's why it's not sustainable. But in 16-17, we're adding to that a whole new grant program, which we're going to be launching, I think, this month or next. And that's specific to food recovery, food rescue organizations. That's $5 million grants. And we're really excited about that. It's for both small organizations and large, and will just be direct funding for those types of organizations.
And as a percentage, do you know what that is across the state? The $5 million?
Percentage of what?
Total dollars spent in food recovery. So food banks.
No, I don't have any idea.
Just a curiosity.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Roberto.
Wait.
Buenos días. Confieso que hoy tenía la intención de tener un perfil bajo en mis intervenciones para ser más efectivo en el mensaje. Pero las intervenciones tanto de Pete como de Kai necesariamente me obligaron a participar. Pete plantea no solamente un tema muy sensible, muy emocional, muy emotivo, sino nos invita a pensar y a repensar nuestro modelo de producción, comercialización y consumo de alimentos. Esa es la consecuencia. Efectivamente, podemos tener altos rendimientos en producción agrícola, podemos tener una distribución muy eficiente con logística, pero lo cierto es que tenemos un problema muy grande de pérdida de alimentos. Y algo que prácticamente no se ha tocado aquí es que esos alimentos perdidos tienen un costo. En economía nosotros decimos que es un costo de oportunidad. Un costo de oportunidad porque alguien lo paga. No solamente se va a la basura, sino alguien lo paga. Y los análisis de quién lo paga son muy importantes para ver cómo revertimos ese proceso. Cuáles son los incentivos económicos que tenemos que introducir, y aquí entra Kai en la ecuación. ¿Cuáles son los incentivos económicos para que los mercados de la cadena alimentaria, en lugar de ver, digamos, perversamente cómo transfiero mis costos al siguiente eslabón, cómo le hago para incrementar mis utilidades, mi valor agregado. En consecuencia, en el caso de México hemos hecho estudios en los últimos 15 años en donde claramente definimos que el costo lo pagan los agentes económicos más débiles de la cadena alimentaria. Ellos son los que pagan finalmente esos costos. Y en el caso de México, los agentes más débiles de la cadena son los consumidores y los productores. Paradójicamente, el inicio y el final de la cadena alimentaria. Los agentes económicos al interior de la cadena, sean los agroindustrializadores, la gran industria alimentaria, los transportistas o los vendedores en gran escala o en el retail, todos ellos tienen la capacidad de transferir sus ineficiencias y sus costos, sus mermas, sus pérdidas, al siguiente eslabón. Consecuencia, visto así, el costo de oportunidad estimado es muy, muy alto en términos económicos. Y eso justifica plenamente inversiones como nuevos negocios, nuevas oportunidades de negocio para poder utilizar inteligentemente ese alimento desperdiciado o tirado. Nosotros hemos hecho, concluyo, nosotros hemos hecho estudios en donde las tasas internas de retorno, la rentabilidad de esas inversiones están por encima del 20%. Una TIR de 20% es una TIR muy, muy atractiva para cualquier empresario. En consecuencia, el problema que tenemos es generar los incentivos económicos al interior de la cadena para que no haya un kilo de desperdicio, un kilo de tonelada o una tonelada perdida de alimentos. Y esto es, en el fondo, empezar a rediseñar el modelo de producción, de distribución y de consumo. De otra manera, no solamente los jaguares, no solamente los pandas, la especie humana tiene el problema de asegurar la sustentabilidad de la cadena alimentaria. Eso es lo que está en riesgo. Gracias.
Yeah, I mean, just in response, if I could, it's one of the reasons why I've been strategic about where we want to focus, both consumer level and with the hotel and hospitality industry. It's a great connection point. Because when I talk to chefs or when I talk to a GM, and especially in places like New York City, they just had a ban on organics, so you can no longer, as a commercial enterprise, put organics in landfills. And they think that's the solution. We're done, right? We don't put it in the landfill anymore. When I talk with them, it's no, I don't even want you to create compost. That's the point, right? We don't grow food to compost it. And that's a fundamentally different cultural and behavioral tactic that has to bleed through. It's fundamentally different, and it's very difficult. But it's something that we're trying to do with this hospitality project. And then when you look back at farm, it's the same thing. It's fundamentally different to say, we don't want to create any type of surplus. We want to have this kind of perfect re-engineering of the entire system. And seafood's another great example, I think. If you had the intention of designing a seafood supply chain that created zero loss throughout the entire stage, the value chain, it would look completely different probably than what it looks like today. And that's the thing we have to do. We can't accept loss at any point.
Okay, thank you. Aaron. Do we have a microphone there? Oh, you don't have one? Okay. Yeah, there you go.
You know, I thought my hand was one. I was born with the microphone in my hand. Anyway, I just thank you very much for your presentation, and it's interesting to find out what's happening in California. The first thing that kind of leapt out at me was that it was the goal for 2025 was a goal of 20% recovered edible food, and we've been struggling with that as a food bank, and we're successful working with the National Zero Waste Council to change edible to nutritious. And why that's comes to the forefront is that I don't know if we really want to measure our success by the amount of Halloween candy and Valentine candy and Christmas candy that gets recovered. And so I just wanted to know what your thoughts were about that.
Absolutely. I mean, we will, like I said, the edible food is in statute, so we have to use that term. But in terms of our very drafty definition, we will try to start incorporating the important parts that need to be in that definition. So we welcome, certainly, your input on that, everyone's input. It's small right now, and I'm sure it's going to change our definition.
Okay, and at the back.
Okay, this is Sam here. I think Roberto hit what I wanted to say, but I do have another comment to make. If you want to actually determine the full impact of food waste, we should go beyond the kind of analysis we are doing right now. For instance, just giving us the number of the tons of carbon monoxide or methane created is not enough. What would be that impact on health of human beings will be a big inclusion to the analysis. And that requires that we do a more full-blown cost-benefit analysis to actually capture all those benefits and costs. And basically, if you use a model like implant that was presented by Claire, that is just a one-time kind of analysis, give you a macro model, macro-level indicators. That doesn't cover all the benefits and costs that could be created over time. So I think to be more inclusive, we need to make sure that we do a full-blown cost-benefit analysis to capture all of those. In terms of what Kay presented, I think you have used a 3-year time frame to do a cost-benefit analysis. And I don't know why that was the case and whether that will provide us a full indication of the impacts.
I don't know actually why that 3-year number was chosen, because I wasn't as intimately involved with the research. Peter, I don't know if you know any better.
No, I wasn't either, but I think it's a standard accounting sort of payback, quite a conservative payback period. If you're saving that that cost, then there's going to be some continuation of that good practice, and 3 years you think is quite a conservative time frame.
And again, the target audience was the CFO, who tends to think in shorter time frames, and to focus really on that pure financial case, recognizing that there are a lot of other embedded costs, benefits, non-financial aspects that need to be considered. But if you were to just sum it up to and narrow it down the scope to what is the CFO going to care about, a 3-year time frame is, to Peter's point, more traditional. So my assumption is that's why, and when the report comes out, the methodology will be in there. And there might be, I forget if there's some explanation about the choice of time frame.
And Peter, did you have another comment or question?
Yeah, great presentations, everyone. And Claire, if you can stick around for the technical questions I might be asked later, that'd be great. And I love the schools initiative, Pete. That's really, really powerful. Just an observation, really. It goes back to Kai's point and the report. We did a lot of work with businesses and fed into a lot of the case studies into the report. And what we find when we work with businesses, big and small, and look at food waste, is that because food waste hasn't got a natural owner in a business, it's not like water or energy or packaging, that there's no one person in the organization who's taking ownership of it. And that's what we really find works really well, is when a business sets a target, gives someone in a senior position the responsibility for looking at food waste, because it's a factor from marketing, from procurement, from technical and specifications, all the way through a business. And that's why often the financial case is lost, because it's in different pots and different budgets and different parts of the business. But the report hopefully will get the CFO and businesses to put their heads together and go, come on, let's report our food waste, the true cost of waste, and then actually some of that action will start to fall into place.
Great, thank you very much.
I could follow up on that just real quick too. The fragmentation. I mean, even as we work with hotels and other businesses, you have, even at the property level, they're not, if you had the chef at a catered event responsible for paying for the food waste they generate, you'd probably have a totally different model where they would be incentivized to reduce it. So we're actually going to test that in part of our hotel work, is that's fragmented at the hotel level, so the chef's not even paying for their food waste, so why do they recognize or want to do anything about it? So. they're paying the cost of food, but they're not paying the disposal of the waste that comes out the back. So we're going to play around with this a little bit, but again, if you're incentivized to reduce that disposal and you're responsible for that disposal cost, which they typically aren't, it's usually property operations or facility managers, maybe it changes the game a little bit.
Okay, and I know we have two final. You need to get your microphone, unfortunately. Yeah, and go ahead, Gabriela. We'll come back to you.
Well, in the name of a chef, because I'm a chef and I'm a cook, and I'll be in the kitchen, and we are taking care of that in Mexico, really. Like, we know that we wasted a lot of food over there, like cooking, but all the chefs, well, maybe we are trying to be more creative, like an example that I just said yesterday, like the pineapple and everything, and we can make like maybe more dishes that we think with all these. We don't name waste. We just name like trimming, like the trimming of the vegetables, and we can reuse it. But we are thinking so. It's just like a comment and a suggestion. Well, just to be close to the hotels and restaurants associations, and as well all the caterings and canteen companies like Sodexo, Compass, because they have like a Better Tomorrow plan or something like that, that they are taking care of the food waste and as well food solutions. Sorry.
Okay, Gabriela.
Commercial.
Right. We have one final comment question.
Yes, thank you. So this question is for Peter. I'm wondering in your pilots with Hilton if you're looking also at sustainable procurement. With the rise of food rescue marketplaces that are popping up, I'm curious if Hilton would be interested in accessing food that is aesthetically imperfect, and so looking at it from the procurement standpoint.
Yeah, I think the two concepts should be married together. So a lot of the partnerships with our partners have been around sustainable sourcing, sustainable seafood, and I think the two concepts need to be together. You have to have sustainable sourcing and waste reduction as part of your overall food management practice, and they're one and the same, really. That's the same strategy, ultimately. So yes.
Okay, thank you for that, and thank you very much to our panel once again.